Welcome to the remote care advocacy presentation specifically for graduate students during this COVID-19 and our shelter-in-place order that we are observing in California and across the nation. I want to send a special thank you to your Graduate Student Association leadership for collaborating with the CARE Office to make sure that we're specifically reaching out to graduate students around experiences of harm, gender-based violence, interpersonal violence, intimate partner abuse, kind of all those umbrella terms, and recognizing that this situation could be creating kind of what many are calling like a perfect storm for not only abuse to be happening, but then also for those that have been experienced violence in the past to be feeling the weight of the situation of what's going on. So I'm Brianna Conway. I am the care director at UC Santa Barbara's CARE Office. I use she and her pronouns, and we are coming to you with Zoom. So I'll allow my colleague to introduce herself as well.
I'm Julia Pinnick. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Assistant Director of Advocacy Services at the UC Santa Barbara Campus CARE Office. And I'm really appreciative of the time and space to share kind of what we're doing to make services available to everyone at this time. So today we're going to be going over kind of a general idea of what survivorship and resources look like for survivors on our campus right now. And so that's going to start off with two sections around how the global circumstances of COVID-19 shelter in place and the global pandemic, is affecting survivors and their healing. And then we're going to go on into figuring out kind of what safety planning looks like right now. Tips for survivors that people can take if they are experiencing the violence themselves, or friends are hearing of any situations for someone in their community that they can maybe give as resources to those direct survivors. And finally, we're going to talk about the resources that are available right now, starting with the CARE remote resources that we're doing and how we've transitioned to this virtual community. And then our final pieces on the local and national resources that would be available to all survivors at this time.
Great, thank you, Julia. So what does it mean to be surviving in a global pandemic? What we're hearing from various news articles and what the research can tell us, and you all may have even seen through your own social media or things like that, that rates of violence can increase during times of a global pandemic and crisis. And so, you know, what does that truly mean for someone who is living in the situation or has a shelter in place, and when being told to stay at home doesn't feel like the safest option? And so we know that self-isolation and quarantine can be pretty dangerous for those that might not be surrounded by those that are in the healthiest of relationships. So, you know, those that choose to commit abuse can be feeling increased risk factors for that. So we know that there's increased stress around financial concerns. We're seeing increases in the uses of substance, alcohol or drugs, and those can all be risky behaviors that someone who's going to commit abuse is going to be more likely to do so when they're under stress or have some of these. So that can create, for survivors, that can create a sense of fear, the unknown, or that they're, you know, what is being portrayed as stay at home and stay safe, and that isn't always the case for a lot of people. And so our care advocates are trained and prepared to act in crisis situations, to be able to jump in and help in those situations and really help our graduate students make plans for themselves. You know, it's really critical that anyone that's experiencing an unsafe living environment in their home has that access to create an individualized plan for themselves, and also making sure that they're practicing understanding and kindness for their self, because these are situations that are a lot out of our control. And so how are we making sure that we're all being really kind and loving to ourselves?
And so then our next piece is how that's directly affecting our survivors and our survivors on campus. And so these are some of the experiences that we've been hearing from folks that we were working with, and then also nationally from our other partners that we work with as well. So there's a lot of feelings and experiences of isolation, like Brianna was talking about, and those pieces of loneliness, which just gets amplified during our crisis experience right now as a community. There's a lot of people expressing to us that they're not finding that access to privacy just for themselves and their own times for healing, right? If we're sheltered in place with a family that doesn't know what's happening for us or has happened to us, then we don't know where and when we can take that breath and really just sit with our feelings and process them well. Or not having access to support services such as calling a care advocate or having a Zoom call with a counselor or any of those support services that we're looking to. A lot of people are expressing this feeling of walking on uneven ground, which is a common feeling for a lot of domestic violence survivors and dating violence survivors, that they feel like they don't know where to step or what that next point looks like. This is happening on a global scale now for everyone. We don't know what next day looks like during COVID-19, and we don't know what resources to rely on all the time. And so it feels like both in our public and private lives, survivors are feeling this unstable setting for themselves. So that can be really difficult. Additionally, we're holding a lot of feelings of these unknowns, which is changing the structure of our day-to-day lives. That can push healing to the back of our list as survivors and make it so that it's not the first thing that we're looking to, and that can be really harmful. But we have other needs that are coming up. We're living and working in the same places, and we're maybe even parenting in the same space, so that all of that is coming together and it's not the top priority for us. Additionally, as graduate students, you might be TAing for a lot of different students from a lot of different environments or even around the world. And our care for them might be taking first place. And so that might also be hindering kind of different avenues for us at this time. And it makes a lot of sense that all the changing needs maybe take the top priority. And finally, we're having a lot of feelings of loss of stability and independence if we've lost our jobs, or feeling that we don't have another resource to go to because of the structure of everyone being in place. We might feel like we can't leave an abusive relationship because we are working from home and we can't find another place to live right now, or because we can't afford to live in another place right now, or maybe our home life, our parents or our community might be of a susceptible population and we don't want to move there and get them sick, and so that can be very difficult. And finally, we want to go over the overarching feeling that a lot of people are feeling right now, which is disenfranchised grief, which is grief that's not explicitly recognized by our general society. So often grief is identified just for big events in our lives, such as a death or a loss of a loved one. But this grief looks like smaller, everyday pieces of unknown and loss of stability. A lot of people are feeling that due to the loss of school structure or the loss of an income or a job to go to, or even the loss of like a graduation. People have worked really hard to get to their advanced degrees to get to this achievement right now, and we might not be able to have a graduation ceremony that we envisioned. And that's a grief, and we want to recognize that that's okay and that's real, and that should be honored in the same way that other forms of grief are.
So we're going to go over what safety planning tips, and really being able to reflect on a current situation and your own individualized experience and what things and what tools might be available. So it can feel really grounding when a lot of these things feel really out of control, and many things are out of our control, but it's really about identifying, okay, what are the small ways in which I can regain that sense of control for myself and make a plan. And so we can do that through safety planning. And so we're going to share a couple of tips that an advocate can work to support you around really creating a personalized safety plan. No two safety plans are going to look the same, and we know that. And so really working kind of within the structures and the experience that you're having as a graduate student. So the buddy system, and so sometimes that's identifying who your allies are, and sometimes that's the CARE Office and our 24-hour hotline, but other times that's someone else in your life that you can maybe check in with. You could create, a code word that maybe when you send a text, they know that you're needing their support and can lean on. Being able to make those planning and preparations. So whether that's, ensuring that you have access to financial resources. Maybe that's having some extra money, on your person rather than relying on debit cards and credit cards and things like that. Having a plan that if you did need to leave in an emergency situation, what would you have packed, and what things are important to you that you would want to make sure that you took with you, and how do you have those things really kind of identified ahead of time, and maybe even packed away and all in one location so that if you needed to leave quickly, you'd be able to. Thinking about the use of technology and how that can help. You could put in systems to help that keep you safe, excuse me. And so, technology is a really wonderful thing, and we're all leaning on it really heavily, but we know that things like social media passwords and phone passwords and making sure that those, that sense of security can be really important if you're in a controlling or abusive dynamic. But then also it's maybe feeling like I'm stuck here, and so how do I create a peaceful space that's emotionally safe, whether that's in a physical location in your dwelling, or maybe it's a time of day, and maybe it's in the morning or the late evening hours, where you can have just that emotional freedom and space to practice that self-compassion that we talked about. Or maybe if it is to rely on some social support and really decrease that isolation that you're feeling. So having things like the CARE number, the CAVS, or your local law enforcement on speed dial is really accessible ways. And then one of the things that I want to really make sure that our graduate students know, that if you're in a situation and you need emergency housing, we can assist. So whether that's through securing payment for an emergency hotel, or looking at more long-term range planning, or getting connected with various shelter supports and things like that, we're happy to help kind of navigate what those emergency housing options would look like if you were to choose to leave.
And that really moves us forward into understanding that all of our resources from the CARE Office, including emergency housing needs, are still available right now, even though we're remote and we're not working in person at this time. The CARE Office we have taken so much energy to come together and find new ways to be together and really help and support wherever possible. So the CARE Office is fully functionally running for advocacy services and our prevention side of staff remotely. We are working via phone appointment and Zoom appointment, whatever feels best for the survivor. Those appointments can be made on our website or calling our 24-hour number, and we'll leave those links at the end. We can schedule at any point in the day that feels best for the survivor or that is safest. We normally work from 8 to 5, but any point that we can figure out the best way, we are going to be available to help and support you. All of our advocacy services are still available, such as reaching out to academic advisors, to department heads and chairs, helping connect you with counseling or therapy services, and even finding that financial assistance for emergency funding at this time are all available to survivors, and we can connect you via these remote access pieces. Care advocacy also is understanding that sometimes we don't have safe spaces to reach out and have these phone calls or Zoom appointments. And so we're really understanding different ways to get connected. And so we're trying to do more online than ever before and create that community and sense of shared space, as well as connecting you with these national resources that have online chat functions or text functions that might be a safer way for some folks to connect.
Great. So on our next slide, we're going to just share the local Santa Barbara-based resources as well as the national resources. And on this slide, I'd recommend this is where you'd want to take a picture, or you could pause the video because it's going to have a lot of information around phone numbers and things like that. But on the left are local, so Santa Barbara-based resources, so our domestic violence agencies or sexual violence agencies, as well as our Legal Aid Foundation. And Legal Aid Foundation are great allies for the CARE Office when we're helping our clients pursue restraining orders. But then on the right-hand side, you'll see some of the national resources. And where the national resources can be really helpful is that they have a lot of online-based resources. So online chat functions or text opportunities. And so if if privacy is a concern, getting on a call or a Zoom is not going to work for your situation, really being able to utilize the national resources. They and the CARE office can connect with whatever the local, if you're far away from Santa Barbara, and all communities have local-based resources. And so we're happy to help in building that safety plan with the local Bay Area, for example, resource, but the national resources also have kind of that database as well, as far as like, so what's in the immediate vicinity of where I am. And so this would be just a great resource for you to have and refer back to, with phone numbers and how to access.
And as we're talking about accessing resources, we wanted to give a little bit of a video on how to navigate our CARE webpage and making an appointment, and also accessing our information to the different identity groups that we want to highlight and support in different ways, understanding that our identities, both as survivors or as graduate students or as people of color or LGBT survivors, are all going to be a little bit different. We want to recognize those resources as needed. So this video here is starting on our CARE webpage. And if you go down to how we help and then make an appointment, you can look at this online form and how we can best fill out an opportunity to meet with you via phone or Zoom. You just click request there. And then if you go to the same tab, the how we help again, and we have communities we care for, we have a whole page about graduate student survivors. Here we really detail what's different for graduate student survivors versus undergraduates, faculty, or staff, and really why it's important for us to make that distinction. We're talking about all the different ways in which we specifically tailor our advocacy to graduate students, and we also give you that opportunity to request an appointment from here as well. So if you click that button right there. And finally, we list those national resources again, so you can find them on our website if you didn't get a chance to take a picture. And at the bottom, if you click at there, we have another link to all the different identities and population groups that we serve, and kind of what's different about that healing modality and the care advocacy that we do. And so if you scroll down here, you see we have survivors of color, LGBT plus survivors, survivors who are men, survivors with disabilities, undocumented survivors, graduate student survivors, international and study abroad survivors, as well as the support for people who are loved ones that are of survivors. And then we're back on our homepage here and just looking at kind of what we've changed for our COVID processes.
Great. Thank you, Julia, for that virtual walkthrough of our website. We're going to leave with just our 24-hour phone number, as well as my email address and Julia's email address if you have questions. Maybe you're going through this and this feels really helpful and relevant, that you could have a safety plan built with an advocate. But maybe you're not directly impacted, but you are concerned about someone who is. And so we just want to also make sure that all of our students, graduate students, know that we can be a resource if you're concerned about a loved one, or you're concerned about a friend that's maybe in an environment that's not feeling the most conducive and the most healthy right now, that we're happy to be able to help you be that supportive friend to them and be that part of the safety plan. And so we just thank you for your time, and we hope that during this shelter in place and these unknown times, that our graduate students will seek comfort in knowing that their resources are here, they're working for them, and we're going to do everything we can to remain available.
Thank you.
Thank you.